When I'm dealing with limits and infinity, I'm dealing with two things, and both of which can be addressed by this single problem. So the first case is when I have a limit, and I take it to a particular point. So I'm taking this limit as it approaches 0. As this approaches 0 from both sides, positive minus 1, positive minus 0.1, positive minus 0.01, these numbers become larger and larger and larger, and they go to positive infinity. So this limit is positive infinity, which is just another case of there being no limit. Since both the left and the right sides don't converge on a single number, then there is no limit. If they were both to go to the same number, then there would be a limit, but since they both go to infinity, they don't agree on a number. But it's not that simple, because this actually gives me a little more information. What it tells me is that there is an asymptote there. So anytime I've got a limit that goes to infinity, as I get closer and closer to a point, and the limit is infinity, then it means there's an asymptote there. So that's one. And the other case is when I take a limit of x as it goes to infinity. So what this is trying to figure out is the end behavior of a function. What happens when x just keeps going out? What's eventually going to happen out there? And often what will happen is that it will approach a value, like in this function. As x becomes larger and larger and larger, the value of this is going to become smaller. It's going to be 1, then a half, then a half, and then a third, then a fourth, and a fifth, and a sixth, all the way down till it's almost nothing, a millionth, a billionth. So as this goes on, it's going to approach 0. And that's another asymptote. It's a horizontal asymptote at 0. And when I take this limit to negative infinity, it is also going to approach 0. It's going to square it, give me a positive number, and it's also going to get closer and closer to 0. So that's the only real distinction between limits, regular limits problems where they don't match up and there is no limit. What the additional piece of information that you pick up from seeing an infinity is that there is an asymptote there, and it can be a vertical one or it can be a horizontal one, depending on if I'm approaching a point or if I'm taking x and going to infinity and trying to find out the end behavior.